Senate will come to order for this Tuesday, February 2nd, February 22nd. There were a lot of 2s going on today. How about that? Okay. Let's have roll call first, then we'll have prayer by Reverend Richard Gilbert.
Roll call, Legislative Day 7, Tuesday, February 22nd. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Here. Beitman? Here. Boner? Here. Bouchard? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Driscoll? Here. Ellis? Present. French? Here. Furphy? Here. Guru? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? James?
Hutchings excused.
Kinsky? Here. Kolb? Present. Cost? Here. Landon? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Here. Pappas? Here. Perkins? Here. Rothfuss? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Steinmetz? Here. Wasserberger? Here. Hutchings? Excused, Mr. President?
Excused, yes.
Excused. James? Here. And President Dockstader.
Here.
29 present, 1 excused.
Reverend Gilbert, prayer, please.
I want to prove to you that we can get a unanimous vote in this Senate. How many agree that it's cold outside? Aye. Let us pray. Creative God, you have designed us for warmth. We bask in the warmth of a summer sun, a campfire, a home fireplace, and our furnaces. We cherish the warmth that is derived from human relationships, parent, spouse, child, friend, colleague. We delight in the warmth of a well-done job, a personal accomplishment, and a communal accomplishment. We deal with the warmth of a heated dialogue, disagreement, and debate. Help us to cool the heat of anger, and thought and talk be reasonable. Since we have been created in your image, O God, we give you thanks for warmth that brings forth best within us. And we look to you for grace and guidance when warmth creates dissension and tension. Today there will be warmth of debate. Grant us words to lower the heat and words to shed light. Today there will be the warmth of collegial affirmation. Help us to be humble and grateful. Today there will be the warmth of inner satisfaction. Help us to be thankful and demonstrate and be gratitude for being more faithful to you, the genuine source of gratuitous gratitude, and to be kind to others, our human brothers and sisters. And so we pray this day, our Heavenly Father, keep us warm, physically, spiritually, mentally, socially, and politically, so that our personal and communal accomplishments may be considered Wyoming worthy. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Senator Case, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Senator Landon.
Mr. President, may I have privilege of the floor?
Please do.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, if you ever heard Vin Scully call a baseball game, it was one of the great experiences of all time. And we lost him a few years ago, but today reminds me of him, so I thought I'd just share this thought. he was remarkable in his ability to paint the picture of a beautiful day at the ball field. And I remember one day he said, there's 2 out in the second inning, bottom of the second, and there's 2 runs in. He said it's deuces wild in the bottom of the second. And today it's deuces wild is how Vin Scully would describe today. It's
All the
second
twos.
month,
I look
22,
down here,
22.
22, 22.
There you go. So Vin Scully would say deuces wild.
Deuce is wild. There we go. Thanks for that, Senator. Appreciate it. A lot of twos going on today. All right, further privileges. Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder today, for second reading of the budget bill, your amendments, your requests for an amendment are due into LSO by 5 o'clock this afternoon. Additionally, many of you there's over 30, just FYI, there's, last count, there's about 34, and which I anticipate that number will increase, amendments to the second reading in the budget so far. Many of those, they've sent you those back for approval. As soon as you've seen those, they also wanted me to make sure, staff want to make sure to mention to you that check your inboxes for approvals on your budget amendments and get the approvals back to them so they can get those things numbered. The longer it waits, the more pressure you put on them. So a lot of those are already out to you. So take a look at them. If you're good with them, get them approved. If you're not good with them, get them amended and then get them approved. And so we can move on tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Wise words from the Appropriations Chair. Senator Kinski.
I just wanted to share with you a reminiscence that comes to mind every time I see those donuts in the break room. And it concerns Tom Kinnison, who many of you served with. And if you didn't know him, he was an interesting fellow to be friends with because it was painful sometimes to be friends with Tom. But he served in the House for quite a while and then in the Senate. And he passed away suddenly from cancer. And as I was preparing his eulogy, I learned from his kids that they were just entering grade school when he began his public service and were leaving college when he finished. That's a fairly significant period of time. And his daughter said that every once in a while he would take her down to Cheyenne with him, but she said she didn't like it because she said it was just a bunch of old people sitting around, drinking coffee, talking, and eating donuts. And then she said, that's when he was in the Senate.
Old people. Okay, thank you. And leave the maple bar alone and the donuts, please. Thank you. Folks, I'll just take a moment, please. Got a class, actually, student council that studies government and oversees the governance of their school out in the far west. They've been studying Wyoming in depth, how it works. They had an opportunity to meet the governor this morning. This is a group of students that are achieving high marks in academics. They belong to a school system that has a lot of state championship trophies, but that may be ending soon because of the growth of this area. It's moving into the 4A class, which means that we have to play Casper and Cheyenne. I'd like you to welcome the Star Valley Middle School Student Council Government class that's made the 7-hour trip over this morning. Folks, if you'd stand and be acknowledged by the Senate. Thank you so much. As you can see, they are addressed for the legislature. Senator Wassenberger,
Privilege of the floor.
please do.
Mr. President, I beg to differ. As a coach at the 4A level against Star Valley, they will do well in 4A. They have always been tough.
Thank you. Sharpen their skills at the 4A level. All right, any other acknowledgements? Let's go ahead and proceed. Thanks for making the trip over Star Valley. Reading correction approval of the journal. Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 21, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Are there any objections? Being none, the report is adopted. New business. I'll note that now. We have Of course, Reverend Gilbert helping us today. Today in Wyoming history, in 1897, President Cleveland issued a proclamation establishing what national forest?
Yellowstone.
Well, in the neighborhood, Bighorn National Forest. Quote for the day, someday everything will make perfect sense. So for now, laugh at the confusion, smile through the tears, be strong, and keep reminding yourself that everything happens for a reason. Very fitting, John Mayer. Session status, the budget bill will be the only bill discussed in the committee of the whole today. Tomorrow will be the second reading of the budget bill. Reports from standing committee.
February 21, 2022. Mr. President, your committee number 4, Education, to whom was referred Senate File 78, Language Proficiency Seal of Biliteracy. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Ellis, Rothfuss, Salazar, and Scott. Senator Scott, Chairman.
Thank you.
February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate File 43, Community College District Elections. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Ellis, Rothfuss, Salazar, and Scott. Senator Scott, Chairman. February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 102, Second Amendment Protection Act. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, Kolb, Cost, Nethercott. Absent, Senator French. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 68, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations Amendments. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Excused, Senator Beitman. Senator Anderson, Chairman. February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 84, Mineral Royalties, Proportional Severance Tax Relief. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, and Wasserberger. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 92, Driver's License or ID Card Renewal or Extension Exception. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Furphy, Landon, McEwen, and Pappas. Senator Landon, Chairman. February 22, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 112, General Government Reports 2, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senators Kinski and Perkins. Senator Hicks, Acting Chairman. February 21, 2022, Mr. President, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 80, Omnibus Water Bill Construction. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinski, and Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Perkins. Senator Kinski, Acting Chairman.
Thank you. That was reports on standing committees. Let's go to bills on second reading. We have one bill. Few. Senate File 23, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 23, Nursing Home Administrators, sponsored by the Labor Committee.
There are no amendments. Senate File 23, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 24, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 24, Pharmacist and Pharmacy Technician Practice, sponsored by the Labor Committee.
There are no amendments. Senate File 24, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 36, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 36, Pharmacy Benefit Managers Act Enhancements, sponsored by the Labor Committee.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
Senate File 36, second reading amendment number 1, page 9, line 12, after.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. President, I'd like to propose and request that be laid back for one day. The author of the amendment is excused today and will not be back until tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Absent objection, the amendment is being laid back. That is second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 36. And we're going to lay back the whole bill till tomorrow, absent objection. That's Senate File 36, folks. Senate File 101, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 101, Epinephrine and Naloxone Administration Authority, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss.
There are no amendments. Second reading of Senate File 101, having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Senate File 103, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 103, Education Limitations on Teaching Critical Race History 2, sponsored by Senator McEwen.
There are no amendments. Absent Senate File 103, having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it is so ordered. Shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, it's ordered. Bills on third and final passage, third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Mr. President, we do have a consent list. I move third reading consent list, which is follows. Senate File 13, Temporary Delegation of Parental Authority. Senate File 18, County Road Maintenance Fund Amendments. Senate File 73, Codifying the Industrial Land Fund.
Would anyone like any of these bills removed from the consent list? On the consent list, Senate File 13, Temporary Delegation of Parental Authority. Senate File 18, County Road Maintenance Fund Amendments. Senate File 33, Codifying the Institutional Land Fund. Chief Clerk, please call. Oh, excuse me, Senate File 73, Codifying the Institutional Land Fund. Chief
Mike,
Clerk,
please.
Chief Clerk, call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. Aye. Murphy. Aye. Garou. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings excused. James. Aye. Kinski. Aye. Cole. Cost. Aye. Landon. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Pappas. Aye. Perkins. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. Wasserberger. Aye. President Dockstader. Aye. On the consent list, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 13, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 13, 29 aye, 1 excused. Senate File 18, are there any changes? Closing vote. Bouchard, aye to no. James, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 18, 27 aye, 2 no, 1 excused. Senate File 73, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 73, 29 aye, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 13, Senate File 18, and Senate File 73 have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading. Senate File 32, third reading of the bill.
Senate File 32, K-3 Reading Assessment and Intervention Program, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to reading assessment and intervention.
There is an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
Senate File 32, third reading amendment number 1, page 192 after.
Thank you, Senator Cost.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, sometimes you try to make an amendment and it just doesn't do what you want to do. I would ask without objection to withdraw the amendment.
Absent objection, the amendment is withdrawn. This is third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 32. Back on the bill. Senate File 32, having been read 3 separate times. Senator Kinski.
And somebody pulled me off the floor here, so I'm sorry for that. Folks, I want to bring to your attention just some concerns that have been raised by my 4 districts, all 4 of whom believe they're already doing these things, and that this is cumulative. Senate File 32, this is cumulative on top of the regulations that we already have. They're all performing according to standards, so Senator Cost's amendment just passed. Is that correct? You withdrew it?
No, it was withdrawn,
Okay,
Senator.
these schools are all performing to standard, and they feel that they should not, because they're not in trouble, be held to these kind of prescriptive admonitions. They point to state law 21-2-204, Wyoming Accountability and Education Act, which already creates an accountability system, which already requires the Department of Education to evaluate schools on exceeds expectations, meets, partially meets, not meets, to coordinate all these targets and make systems of support available to school districts that are not performing. And specifically, there's 21-3-401, Reading Assessment and Intervention, which starts out, each school shall select and implement a reading assessment and intervention program that uses an instrument that screens for signs of dyslexia and other reading difficulty as early as possible, kindergarten through grade 3, and implements it and goes through. The schools that aren't performing should be helped by the superintendent and have a plan for improvement. This bill, as I understand it from my district, goes one step beyond that and tells them exactly how the Cheyenne wants them to do that. And that's where my districts are concerned, that this really is a loss of control for local districts, for local school boards to determine how best to reach that goal. They said if the schools that are floundering, we already have provision in law. Please don't subject those of us who are succeeding to yet another mandate from Cheyenne. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. 4 different districts, I don't know if you've heard for yours, but I've certainly heard from mine on and against the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We are on third reading discussion for Senate File 32, K-3 Reading Assessment and Intervention Program. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, on and for the bill. Let's remember what we're talking about here. We, of all the things that we do as a state government, perhaps the most important thing is the education of our children. And our consultant on the last recalibration effort said very bluntly that the children that on the YTOP assessment, the state assessment, score in the basic or below basic category, or put it another way, are not proficient or advanced on the score, are not being adequately prepared for the modern world of work that is coming at us. And the evidence we've seen on the Education Committee suggests the consultant was accurate. So this bill is the first step in trying to remedy that. And the good senator from the northern part of the state is right. Of his 4 districts, one of them is very small. It's hard to tell where they really are. The other 3 are among the better performers in the state. But even one that is one of the better performers is leaving 31% of its kids behind. That's not an adequate performance. It may be better than the state average, but it's not an adequate performance. What does this bill do? It has some standardization, and we did modify that after discussion with the State Department of Education, so it's less prescriptive, so that we can accommodate all the systems out there that are working. We are seeking to have additional professional development. That's a problem that was identified to us, and we've heard quite a bit about it. These districts may be fine, it's funded in the model. They won't, if they're funding it according to what the model does, we should be fine there. It also has a provision here that the parents be informed of the results that the school district is getting on the assessments. And, Mr. Chairman, we heard a fair amount of testimony that that is not universally happening, and that may be down not at the school district level, but below that, where you have individual decisions that they don't consult the parents on that. I have no idea how the districts in Sheridan and Johnson County perform on that one, but it was identified to us as a frequent problem, and some of it is the reaction that you sometimes get from the parents. I think that's important. But this is a step. This bill represents a small step in trying to work on this problem. And frankly, I think we're better off trying to move everybody forward. I think everybody ought to be required to notify the parents when there's a trouble. They are potentially your biggest ally in getting the problem fixed. That's a part of the bill. I think everybody ought to recognize that we do need some special efforts and professional development in this area because our results overall are not really satisfactory. So for those reasons, I would urge us to adopt this bill. It is going to be uncomfortable for some of the districts. But frankly, a district that is leaving 30% or at the statewide average, 46% of the kids behind, so they're not performing adequately on the key reading measure, not performing adequately to really prosper in the kind of economy we're headed for and are, in fact, entering right now. That is not an adequate performance, and this bill is a step forward, albeit a small step, in where we need to go. So on and for the bill, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Schuler, this is on Senate File 32, third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I actually moved I mean, I voted to move this bill forward because I really did think the intent is good, and I understand the work that was put behind it with the Education Committee. But again, after visiting with some school district officials in my neck of the woods, they have some concerns. And I think their biggest thing is kind of what we see happening quite often in education. When they did their last revision with K through 3, you know, they immediately implemented and got some really good results, and have a number of people that are doing well in a couple different districts. The problem is when you only do something for a couple of years and then you start over again with another program, sometimes you don't even have time enough to get the data that you need to find out if the last one was really effective. So, and that was kind of even a complaint I had when I was in the education field, that it seemed like every couple of years we were doing something different, recycling, changing. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but sometimes if you move a little too quickly, sometimes you really don't have the data to know, did this work, did it not work, what was good about it, what was bad. So I after hearing concerns that the folks in my area had, I would probably vote against this, just because they are using all the evidence-based information. They're training their teachers professionally with everything, and they have screeners that are ones that are in our state, the DIBELS and the RAN assessments that are all evidence-based and research-based. And so I think they're doing a great job. I understand the intent. I think the bringers of the bill and the Education Committee were headed down a good path, but I'll have to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Let's go to Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill. I think, you know, we've gone down this discussion of, you know, talking about test scores, and I just want to reemphasize this bill has nothing to do with more assessments. Refreshing your memory, a few years ago, we had a big conversation about what kind of screening tools, and that's what we're talking about, are screening tools that districts can use to determine whether or not a young student is struggling with reading. These tools are supposed to take 5 to 7 minutes. We're not trying to get teachers to train kids how to ace these exams. They're really intended to identify those students that are struggling with reading, including those students who may have dyslexia. As we rolled that out a few years ago, we have learned more. This bill seeks to put a finer point on the efforts we undertook in 2019. Specifically, if you look at the language on page 4, it says that the department shall identify criteria through rulemaking which will inform what kind of screeners the districts use. So in that rulemaking process, all of these districts that want to carve themselves out, instead of carving themselves out, we're asking them to come to the table and explain why their tools that they're using right now are adequate. So this concern that somehow they're being penalized, they'll have the full ability to participate in the rulemaking process in developing the criteria that the department will later use to announce which screening tools are appropriate. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that, you know, the good chairman of the Senate Education Committee said it well. There are still kids, even if you're in a high-performing district and your test scores show it, you still have kids who are falling behind. And we know that those students, if they're not caught soon enough, are oftentimes placed in special ed. When they're placed in special ed, the cost of administering education for them skyrockets. Unfortunately, we've also seen data in our recalibration and other efforts that say 40% of the students that are identified in special ed are not special ed kids. They're misplaced in that category, which is expensive for the state of Wyoming and also detrimental to that student. So what we're trying to do is have a better uniform system across the state to flag those kids sooner, get them the interventions they need. And this bill provides a process for districts to participate in that. So I disagree with the characterization, and I want to be clear too. We often in this chamber like to throw out down here in Cheyenne. We need to stop saying that. I live in Cheyenne. The people of Cheyenne are not weighing in on this. If you want to talk about state government and the legislature, that's fine. But we need to stop saying those of you guys, Cheyenne, this is, you know, Cheyenne doing this. City of Cheyenne has nothing to do with this. So let's change how we talk about our city, our fair city that we're in right now that hosts all of you every year. But on and for this bill, Mr. President, it's an important one. Our kids deserve better.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to go back. Senator Kinsey stood first. Senator Rothfuss, you get ready. Senator Kinsey.
My apologies to the folks of Cheyenne. I just use that as shorthand for state government, and I didn't mean to impugn the people of this beautiful capital city. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm going to support this bill, but I just want to provide some clarifications and my views on it, because I guess what I'll say is it's not as good as some think it is. It's not as bad as others think it is. On balance, based on where it's at right now, I'm an aye vote, but I did want to provide a little bit of clarification and background. We've been working this topic for a lot of years. This is not the first bill we've seen in the Senate that relates to K-3 education. The good senator from Casper brought some good legislation a number of years ago. I think the good senator from Campbell County had some years ago. I think the tall senator from Casper, he had some legislation in this space probably a couple of decades ago. So we've been looking at this for quite a long time. And we've been doing good work. One of the concerns that I have that I want to dispel is the fallacy that we are failing to teach our K-3 children to read. We are failing to teach some of them to read. We're actually the third best in the country when you look at state scores in third grade, actually fourth grade because they don't test third grade. But when you look at fourth grade reading, Wyoming is third best among the states in the country. We have steadily improved over the past decade from middle of the pack to now third. Third is ridiculous for a rural state like ours to achieve. It's amazing. It's exceptional. It's a true testament to the work, not just that this chamber's done. We've done some nice things, and the other chamber's done some nice things, but that our educators have done, that they've been enabled to do over the past decade. So I don't want this to be a story of failure. For the most part, we do an excellent job, and the reason that the data say that we're not meeting expectations is because we set the expectations bar very high. We did that intentionally. We have, through our YTOP testing, Mr. President, some of the highest standards in this country in terms of what is an acceptable level of reading skill. So the fact that you're not adequate or above, that doesn't mean you can't read. It means that you're not meeting the standards that we've set, where we've set rigorous standards. So I wanted to clarify that. We're not failing. We're doing an excellent job. Our teachers are doing an exceptional job. In fact, this is our strongest area. If you asked me, where do we need to look a little bit harder, it would be 8th grade math. We're not doing as well as we should in 8th grade math. That's where we're not doing well enough. But again, that's not on topic here. If you were to ask me later, though, that's what I'd tell you. With regard to this bill, though, the question is this going to make us even better with regard to K-3 reading? And because I think the answer is yes, just a little bit, I'm going to vote for this bill. And the reason I think that is the emphasis on professional development related to early childhood literacy and the structured language that's put in there where that's being emphasized. And we've heard good testimony that indicates that our educators are not necessarily getting enough professional development in that K-3 literacy, and so this emphasizes that, and I think that's valuable. Another thing we've heard is that while there are a lot of different screeners out there, not all screeners are created equally for looking at early childhood reading deficiencies such as dyslexia. And this calls together a group of expert stakeholders and says, hey, establish some criteria for what makes a good screener, and then WDE with that develop a list of what are good screeners so that when our school teachers are providing that early screening, not the IDEA education, but the early screening, there's an understanding of what are and what are not good screening tools. So again, to me, that's a good thing. It's something that we don't have. I don't think it's onerous the way that it's structured. I don't think it penalizes anyone the way that it's structured. And it took some work, honestly. The first draft we had in the Education Committee, there's no way I would have voted for it because it was prescriptive. This isn't very prescriptive. It's not very onerous. It's adding value instead of taking away that value. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I'll be kind of a soft eye on this bill. I do understand the concerns. I will add, though, that it really isn't more testing. It does require screenings be done 3 times a year. That's a standard practice. I think all of your districts probably already do that. If they don't, they should, for early childhood education. And when I say screening, to be clear, I don't mean the same thing as a rigorous test like YTOP. Screeners should take 5 to 7 minutes at most. They're best when done in the classroom. That's sort of the ideal. They aren't always done in the classroom. If you have a reading specialist, the students might be taken out for 5 minutes, and it's a quick screening tool. And then that screening tool is what you use if there's a flag raised that would identify students that you would then provide more testing and analysis and understanding to. So it's that early flag, and what we understand is that trying to get that analysis as early and thoroughly as possible
Senator, let's have a
is most
concluding
helpful.
comment.
And with that, Mr. President, again, I'd urge an aye vote on Senate File 32. It's fine.
Thank you. Further discussion on Senate File 32. Let's go to Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, years ago, we started out with No Child Left Behind, and everybody was expected to get to 100% of their kids in all areas. And finally, the reality of that stepped down. Now at 85% in literacy, we want at least 85% of our students in third grade to, on the Y-top test, reach advanced or proficient. And again, it's a pretty high level. I'm not saying you can't meet it, but I'm also saying those 15% aren't going to be left behind either, because everybody's working towards that. The thing that I'm looking at is we put in a multi-tiered system. We've had Y-top changed a couple of times. We haven't had the consistency to really show the data where it needs to be. The multi-tiered system to determine where students need support is an extremely important part that was put in a couple of years ago, and it's working, and it shows that it's working out there. I think what we have, if you truly read it, and what's in this bill really are almost identical. I don't see the need for both. What I do see the need for is to give credit where credit is due. We are doing well in fourth grade. We do show great progress. We can't compare YCAS to the rest of the tests nationally, so we've got to use different tests for that we volunteer for, except that it's everybody takes it, but that's all right. I think we've got to look at a common test across. And as far as our experts that come in and evaluate on recalibration, I'll save my comments on that for later, but I have questions there too. What I'm saying is, we've got to be careful about overstepping. We've got to be careful about what we're telling our districts. Our districts really do know what's best for their district. I'm not pulling anything away from reading. I'm not saying it's not important. It's very important. I'm certainly not saying that we shouldn't be trying to identify those problems. But I think, and I have pretty good knowledge that we are doing that. So do we need one more bill that says that? I don't know. My attitude is, I think we're doing fine with what we have. I think we ought to stick with it and see what turns out. We need to look at growth and see whether that makes a difference. With that, I'll say vote it up or vote it down, but I really don't think it's going to make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on Senate File 32. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I find myself in the same situation as the good senator from the wrong side of the Bighorns.
Well, we've had issues with Cheyenne and the Bighorns now.
I'm currently representing 8 school districts, soon to be 10, I think. And of those 10, 9 of them are in the very top tier. They're doing a great job. I think these schools, instead of being pulled down and not necessarily pulled down, there's some schools here that are obviously not doing their job. But these schools that are doing so well need to be recognized and addressed, and maybe instead of the state government telling them how to do their job, maybe they should be doing the leadership and the teaching themselves, and bring that knowledge that these really great schools have back down to the rest of the state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Good luck with the 9 school board meetings. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we've gone back and forth, good fellow senators on this bill, I'm going to stand up and support the work of our good education committee. Fellow senators, we all know what it's like to be in the interim and do our committee work and come out to this floor and present it to one another. And it can be challenging sometimes, and we work together as teams, and you see that from us on the Appropriations Committee this week and how hard we're defending our budget bill because we worked so hard on it. And I know these good folks have worked really hard on this issue. They have taken a lot of testimony, and they've come to this floor with their best recommendation and their best work. And so we might get a little pushback on it from some other folks that may not want to implement some of these things at times, but I'm going to stand with our good education committee and their good work on this bill and vote aye, and I would ask you to do the same. Oh, and Mr. Chairman, before we go on, I did want to say happy Second Amendment Day. Today is 2/22/22, and I know we're all great supporters of the Second Amendment in this body, so happy unofficial Second Amendment Day.
Thank you. Senate File 32. Let's, Senator Scott, we're going to let you wrap up. Let's go back to Senator Driscoll.
Simple question, and it's really fast, is which is the right side of the Bighorns, facing north or south?
For another debate. Let's go back to the chairman of the Education Committee, Senator Scott, to wrap it up for us.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer the last question. I think the right place to be in the Bighorns is on top of them. Or coming down the crazy one. Mr. Chairman, we've had a good debate. I hope, this bill is not going to solve all the problems. It's just not. We don't yet understand as well all the things we need to do to make the kind of improvements we really do need so that our students are adequately prepared for the world that's coming at them. And we all know that many of them are well prepared. I've had the occasion privilege on occasion to judge some of the high school debate tournaments where you see the best of the best. And they're very good. And a credit to both Wyoming schools and their Wyoming's people, the kind of kids we're raising. But we are not getting to, there's too many kids we're not getting to. And you can argue about that. There's always an argument, do we get the cut score right on the test? But what we are seeing is a tremendous variation among the districts. What we are seeing is some of the districts, like I'll cite Thermopolis, they showed at 60% in the basic and below, which our consultant says is not adequate to prepare them for the coming world of work. We need improvement there. Or you look at the Uinta 1 Evanston, 49% basic and below. We have some work to do. I think this bill is starting to make some of the districts, some of the superintendents a little uneasy. I hope it does, because it is saying, come on, we all got to work together to improve things. And Mr. President, I think the senator from the Ivory Tower gave a pretty good summary. We don't do as much as we would like to in this bill. It will make it a bit better. And I'll promise you,
that we'll bring you something in the future that is much more ambitious, that will make more of your districts uncomfortable. But we need to do that because this is the most important thing that state and local government in Wyoming does, is education. So let us join together and take this small step, and it is a small step, to improve, and let us keep it up, and let us all work as a team. School districts, the executive branch with the Department of Education, and the legislature, to try to do a better job for our kids. Because really that has been, Mr. President, the history of this country. That all of us adults work together to make our kids more successful in this world than we were. And with the high-tech world we're getting into, literacy and knowledge of math and science, which do depend on literacy, are going to be a key to enable our kids to make our world, our country better. So for all those reasons, Mr. Chairman, let us unite to take this small step down that road, and I'll promise you we will seek to bring you more and try to get further improvements in the future.
Ready for the question? Question called. Senate File 32, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 32. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings excused. James? Aye. Kinski? No. Kolb? Aye. Cost? No. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? No. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? No. Schuler? Aye to no. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 32, 21 aye, 8 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 32, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate, Senate File 32 has passed the Senate. Senate File 49, first reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 49, repeal of specified state boards and commissions sponsored by the Management Audit Committee, an act relating to boards and commissions.
There's an amendment. Please read in the amendment.
Senate File 49, third reading amendment number 1, page 11 after line 18 in.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 49, ask for the body's favorable consideration. Fellow Senators, what this amendment does, it's a consequence of some of the feedback we got after the interim ended. Once we got this bill into the committee, we made the decision to not completely get rid of the advisory committees and each of the divisions within the Board of Control. So they have the capability, but not the requirement to have these advisory committees. And once we made that change on committee of the whole, I felt it was necessary to stipulate who decides whether there's an advisory committee or not. After coordinating it with the state engineer, we went ahead and said the Board of Control will decide whether or not there's an advisory committee or not within each of the 4 divisions within the state of Wyoming. So I felt this is just a prudent cleanup measure to make sure there's a clear authority when it comes to this optional capability that would exist within the state engineer's office if the bill goes forward. That's the extent of the amendment. I'd certainly stand for any questions. If not, I call for the question.
Discussion on the amendment. Question being called. This is on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 49. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. Again, and that is third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 49. We're back on the bill, Senate File 49. Any further discussion? Question? Question? Question being called. Senate File 49, having received the affirmative vote, Senate File 49, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 49. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings excused. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote? Closing vote closed. Senate File 49, 28 aye, 1 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 49, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 49 has passed the Senate. Consideration of bills on general file. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, with that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
I move the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
For the motion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Senator Wasserberger, the Senate is yours.
Knock it off out there. Committee of the Whole will please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 12, and there is an amendment. I'm sorry. Would the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 12,
Okay.
Airport Restaurant Liquor Licenses, an act relating to alcoholic beverages sponsored by Senator Anderson. It was referred to Committee Number 1, which Attorney Committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the due pass recommendation of Senate File 12, Airport Restaurant Liquor Licenses. There is a standing committee amendment, Mr. Chairman. Can I have that read in?
Senate File 12, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 18, delete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll turn to the sponsor, the good Senator Anderson, of the bill and the Standing Committee Amendment. He can explain both thoroughly. So if I may, call on Senator Anderson at this time.
The good Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 12. I'll read that in when I come to it. What all this bill does is changes the liquor license at your local airport to a resort license. And that frees up a liquor license in your community, whether that's city or the county. Some of these airports are in city jurisdiction, some are in county jurisdiction. So we went to the provision 12-4-401 Resort Retail Liquor License Bill and added in there applicants of or owners or leasers of a restaurant operating in an airport where the restaurant satisfies the requirements of this subsection, and then you can read the requirements there. So it frees up a liquor license in your community, makes it just a resort license because they only use it a few hours a day, sometimes just a few days a week. So it is not really a full liquor license. The amendment changes on line 2, or page 2, line 18. It changes the 50 to 25. One of the requirements we had was a seating capacity of 50, and we found out that there wasn't very many bars in airports that actually had that kind of seating, so we need to change that to 25 so all the airports will qualify. The other thing was to make it a commercial service airport, and that's on page 3, line 8, right before premises. It would put in commercial service airport and then delete owned or leased by the licensee. And that's all the bill, Mr. Chairman. I would stand for questions or call a question on the amendment if I could.
Question being called. Senator Case, we are on the amendment.
So, Mr. Chairman, I own one of these restaurant or these resort liquor licenses. It's kind of a unique liquor license, and I'm not sure why it's being chosen to be gored in this whole process. And I do have a conflict on this bill. I don't intend to vote on it, but I'm allowed to speak on it by our rules. So to get a resort license, it was designed for large hotels that had a food service operation, a large restaurant, and over 100 rooms. That was the original idea. The license is like other licenses in the sense that you can have catering permits and things like that, but it is restricted to not have package sales, and so I guess that makes sense. But places don't have to have package sales. You're not obligated under any other license to actually have package sales. So maybe that's why they picked this license. But the other thing about the resort license is it allows for you to have service anywhere on your premise. And for a hotel, it's perfect because you can have like a room in one room. You can set up a full bar in there and have a wedding, and then you can do it by the pool. And you're legal to serve alcohol anywhere on your defined premise. That's kind of the unique aspect of a resort license. It was never subject to the number requirements because if someone went to the trouble of building a 100-room hotel with a restaurant and meeting space, you wanted to have some assurance that you could achieve one. So it's like, well, we're trying to find a place for these airport licenses rather than maybe creating their own category. We just decided to shoehorn it into the resort license. It does not a very good fit in my mind, Mr. Chairman. It kind of messes things up a little bit about it. Now you've got two paths to get a resort license, which is, I don't know, it's not very consistent. And this looks like it was just a convenience to me, Mr. Chairman, but I am a conflict on the bill. I just want to tell you a little bit more about these licenses. Thank you.
Conflict noted, Senator Case. We are on the amendment. Is there any other discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 12, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 12 has passed. We are back on the bill. Senator Garou.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too I'm declaring a conflict on this one. I'm in a class of 2, I think, on this one, the 2 airport liquor license holders. So I won't be voting on it, but I just want to talk, there's 2 bills. There's one down the hall and there's one here. And I understand the good senator's comments from just a few minutes ago about resort liquor license. This is one of those voted up, voted down things, but what I want to say is that I do agree with the idea. And the idea is for an airport to have a liquor license of their own by whichever vehicle you choose, and then have an operator come in and operate that license. So that way at your local airport, you'll be able to get food, be able to get drink, be able to get these services. That only helps our airports and helps our airports as they grow. And so and I think that's the trick. Right now, I have a retail liquor license at our airport. If it's in my lease to have one, but really it's my license. I could take it if I wanted to. The only people that could stop me would be the county commissioners who would probably would and should, because that's what it was given to me for, was for the airport. But in essence, I think it'd be better at the end of the day if the airport held that license and I was the operator. That would be the smart way to go. And if this bill were to pass, I'd go to my airport and ask them to do it. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Conflict noted. Further discussion? Are you ready for the question? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, we've heard some good comments on this bill. The reason it was chosen as the resort license is because of that packaged liquor. They do not do packaged liquor. All the alcohol has to be consumed in the bar at these airports. They cannot take it on the flight. They cannot take it out of the airport. So the resort license really works well for that. And maybe it was convenient because that's about the only place they could be put. So on and for the bill, we need to get this done. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, one more question, and this actually, I guess, goes to the good senator from the Lander area. Is if not this, what would the approach be? I did hear the suggestion of having an entirely new draft, which obviously we can't do within this bill title, changing it to the extent of creating a new type of liquor license. I mean, I've always viewed, I guess I should announce that beforehand, being in a small class of senators that don't have a liquor license. I will not be declaring a conflict. It'd be like me and 2 other people voting on this bill. But what would a classification look like? This is such a murky area of law that I think it's kind of hard to figure out what the right answer is. I certainly see a lot of reason and justification for airports holding a separate type and not be in a position to compete with those in the downtown area, which I think is kind of what the intent of a traditional liquor license is. So I see the need, I see the interest and the motivation for this legislation. I don't know that it's the perfect answer, though. So if the good senator from Lander has an idea of maybe an amendment that would strengthen this and cure some of the ills, or if there's a way to go forward, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. If the issue is really about the package sales, any one of these licenses could be sub-designated to restrict packages. You could have, and there are some licenses like a restaurant license and a bar and grill license. They're both not affected by the population totals, and they require that you serve food. There's a different amount of food, and that could be a possibility. There's a little odd piece of state law that if you order a bottle of wine, they're allowed to recork that wine. You know, it gets a seal on it. That doesn't really work for the airport situation, but that's true no matter what license you're working on. But a full retail liquor license, I don't think that's really what the airports are about. So I think any one of the licenses would work fine. The resort license had the specific requirement about the physical plant. 100 rooms, meeting facilities, restaurant. You know, and so you're just kind of going into the that licenses and saying, except for this situation, it's also available over here. Well, you could do that in any license, which would be a better fit and restrict package sales, in my opinion. You can't do it in this bill, I don't think. You know, it's just wacky. And they come up with the wacky stuff, and then they never talk to the people that maybe know a little bit more about it.
Is there any further discussion? Sensing none, question being called, Senator Perkins.
I do have one question. I mean, right now, we think, you know, because we live in Wyoming and recognize that, there's only one restaurant. But at some point, I go to a lot of airports and there's more than one restaurant in there. So does every restaurant in there have to have a liquor license? Or does the airport get to have this and and everybody that's got a restaurant in there, are they going to be covered under this license? Have we thought about that?
Further discussion, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, this is for the bars in the airports, not the restaurants, but it could be a bar restaurant operation. It would not, as we understand it, it would not cover more than one. It wouldn't cover all the restaurants and bars in the operation. But I guess that would be left up to the local airport board if they wanted to cover them all with a liquor license. I don't know what would happen in that case. We don't have too many of those situations, but maybe one of the operators that operates in a restaurant in a airport could address that. One of the guys from the wrong side of the Bighorns.
Is there any further debate? Senator Garou from the wrong side of the Bighorns.
Wrong side of most things, most times. The way I hear it here. That's all right, though. It's okay. In answer to the good senator's question, in a lot of airports, in most airports actually, the master contract for all the restaurants is held by one entity. And then they're called different names. Even at DIA, all the restaurants are held under one contract to be one operator. And then they're all sub-operators off of that. I do that at one of the airports that I work in. I work under different names, sorry. But the other question I have is, since it was brought up, about this packaged liquor, actually one of the biggest components of my business, I have a retail license, is I sell packaged liquor. I sell gifts liquor, and this dovetails back into why I think it's important to have some bill, because as communities, and I'm looking at my good friend from Sheridan, and you know, as that area grows, you know, you may have a brewery there, you may have a winery there that produces a local product, like we have in our community, or our folks, friends in middle of the state produce a whiskey. I sell that. I'm one of the largest sellers in the country of that whiskey, because I sell a little bottle of it with a little metal sign saying that our state name and then that whiskey, and people take it home and put it in their man cave or woman cave and downstairs, and well, you probably wouldn't be surprised what I sell it for. That's why I can be on 10 committees of the legislature. So, because I sell it for this outrageous price, I can be down here. So, you know, it is part, as we grow, as our tourism industry grows, we might want to avail ourselves of that. And there might be an airport that has separate restaurants. And so I hope that day comes soon, and with the right investment, maybe we'll get there. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but may answer one that comes up later. Thanks.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I would tell you I'm absolutely amazed by this debate. I had no idea the level of expertise of the senators in this body had on liquor. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this bill, given the level of expertise that we've heard today.
Further discussion. Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation that Senate File 12 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 12 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 48. Would the reading clerk please read the Senate file? Oh, maybe I should give it to you.
Senate File 48, 2022 Large Project Funding, sponsored by the Natural Resource Finding Committee, an act relating to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Funding Act, was referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Bouchard, French, Cost, and Wasserberger. Senator Boner, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Giroux, Hicks, Kinski, Steinmetz, excuse Senator Perkins. Senator Kinski, Acting Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation in Senate File 48. To explain this good little bill, I refer to the senator that's from one side of the bighorn or the other.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 48, very simple bill. It's part of our annual funding for the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Funding. We have 5 large project funding projects this year, and they are scattered from the Black Hills all the way to the Wasatch. So a good mix. I won't spend a lot of time on them. The first of the 5 is sponsored by, let me get to it here, by Crook County Conservation District. It's a forest health project in northeast Wyoming, involving approximately 350,000 acres in Crook and Weston County. Forest cleanup, fire mitigation, habitat improvement, and grazing improvement. Good project in a good area. The second project we're going to talk about is the KC Buffalo Mule Deer Crossing. It's a continuation of the project that's been going on for several years. The purpose of the project is to minimize the crash level, if you will, the impact level on the mule deer, give them a safe crossing across I-25. It's been very successful in what the work we've done, and it's an ongoing project, and this is a big piece of it. The next project I'm going to talk to you about is they call it the Killdeer Wetlands, and it's actually a fish habitat improvement and flood control project through the city of Green River on the Green River. There was some work done there a few years ago that was less than successful. We're going to go back in and lower the dam, improve the fish habitat, and improve the wetlands through the city of Green River. It's a great project. The next one we'll talk about for a minute is the South Pass Aspen 3. It's the third stage of the habitat improvement up there. If you've driven across South Pass in the last few years, you'll see that what used to be aspens got replaced by conifers. We're going back to an aspen stand. It's a great project. It's designed for fire control, for habitat improvement, and what we've done so far has been a massive success. And then the fifth project is the Henry's Fork Fish Passage down on the Henry's Fork River. Its purpose is flood control, improve the fisheries, improve the irrigation delivery and efficiency. Another great project. So that's our 5 projects. They're all excellent projects funded by the Wildlife Trust Fund. And with that, let's stand for questions.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak directly to the Killdeer Project 2 in Green River to help everyone know kind of what this thing could do or would do. The Green River goes through literally the town of Green River, and they have massive ice builds up in the wintertime. I mean massive, just rolls over and causes much difficulty for the town and issues of that nature. So this would do something to alleviate that, to help the area, enhance the area. So it's not just a fluff project, it's something that's a big problem there with the green. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation. Senate File 48 do pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Senate File 48 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 26. Would the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 26, District Judge Positions, Authorization and Funding, sponsored by the Judiciary Committee, an act relating to the judiciary, was referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Cooper, French, Kolb, Cost, and Nethercott. Senator Nethercott, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Guru, Hicks, Kinski, Steinmetz. Excused, Senator Perkins. Senator Kinski, Acting Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the due pass recommendation of Senate File 26. Good Senators, this is the District Court Judge Positions Authorization and Funding. This is the bill that addresses that. As you heard on the introduction of the bill, it has been referred to appropriations and it had a full support of your number 2 committee. The fiscal note explains the cost implications associated with this bill, and you've previously heard testimony about the need for the addition of these judges across our state. There is a compelling need that we need to alleviate the overworked nature of our district court judges' dockets, primarily as it relates for funding in the 3rd and 7th judicial districts. The 3rd judicial district, again, for your reference, is Uinta, Lincoln, and Sweetwater counties. That is one judicial district, and so they would be receiving an additional district court judge. And then Natrona County, which of course is Casper, and they would be receiving an additional district court judge. Happy to stand for questions and urge your favorable consideration.
Further discussion? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to weigh in and support this bill, and so I'm honored for it, of course. In the 3rd district, where Judge Blumel is, he sits in both Lincoln County and UNA. It's the busiest district court judge. He is the busiest district court judge in the state. Just the caseload, workload numbers over the last 11 years show that that judge sitting in those 2 counties has consistently done the work of 1.6 judges, and I know he's getting burned out, and I think we want to keep him around. And the sad part too is the fact that we have caseloads that are stacking up, and people are not being able to get their cases heard, and I think in a timely manner. So I would hope that all of you would vote for this. It's definitely needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion? Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, this goes back pre-COVID days. Started talking to the judiciary in that part of the state. They showed me the workload. I actually visited the chambers, actually on more than one occasion, just taking a look at what we had there. And we were getting it ready, working with the good folks up in the Campbell country because they had some needs too. What we had in Southwest Wyoming, we had brick and mortar already in place. We just needed the manpower, the brain power as it was, for the judiciary to take on the workload for that entire region. And we're getting ready to do it. And this was in the downturn. First of all, we had the financial downturn in front of the COVID. We're still trying to sort that out and work this into the system and make sure that we had the judiciary and the whole judicial system covered in Southwest Wyoming. And then right after that, COVID hit and everything kind of got put on hold. So folks, this has been in the works for quite a while to get this taken care of. I urge your support. Now's the time to get that taken care of and ask for your favorable vote.
Further discussion? Seeing none, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Nethercott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the favorable recommendation. Senate File 26 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 26 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 47. Would the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 47, Carbon Storage and Sequestration Liability, sponsored by the Minerals Committee, an act relating to geological sequestration of carbon dioxide. It was referred to Committee Number 9, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, when the committee of the whole rise to report, I recommend that Senate File 47 do pass. And to explain that bill, I will call on the senator from the wrong side of the bighorns.
Senator Cooper.
No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I was just kind of waiting to watch the good chairman of the Minerals Committee try and figure out how he's going to manage this long and complicated bill with no support, but I'll just do it instead. Mr. Chairman, Senate File 47, Carbon Storage and Sequestration Liability, was the work of the Joint Minerals Committee during the interim, and this is an important bill. It's really a start in some ways of a process where we'll probably have to come back a few times and revise this bill in the years ahead because we want to make sure that we continue to revisit it and get it right. The positive side of that, though, is that we've got plenty of time to get it right, but we need to get it on the books because having a process and having an understanding of how liability associated with carbon storage and sequestration, having that framework in place is going to be essential to start utilizing it and moving down this path, which is obviously vital to the economic interests of the state of Wyoming. So, Mr. Chairman, walking through the legislation, we have creation of new statute beginning on page 1 and on to page 2. Starts off with the definition of the injector. And the concept there is that the injector is that entity that has title to the carbon dioxide that is being injected and stored underground within the unit area. And you can see in Roman 2 that they shall hold the title for the injected or stored carbon dioxide until the department issues a certificate of project completion. I'll pause for a minute to give just a little bit of background and remind the legislature that the state of Wyoming was the first state that had comprehensive carbon sequestration legislation on the books, which dealt with pore space ownership and how that would be managed, where the pore space itself is considered an ownership right associated with the surface estate, not the mineral estate. And there's some comprehensive legislation that was built around that by a previous speaker and a previous minority leader over in the House. Spent a lot of time, and it was kind of the guidance that other states looked to. But there's been a lot of work since then, and there's been a lot of evolution since then. We're getting to the point where we want to start utilizing this for permanent sequestration, which gets into the concept of a couple of different types of wells for injection. There's the Class 2 injector well, which is regulated by the OGCC. And what we're talking about here is going to be dealing with a Class 6 well, which is regulated by our Department of Environmental Quality. DEQ has to apply for primacy and authority over a Class 6 well with the EPA. We have that primacy, and we want to make sure that anything we do here doesn't threaten that primacy, because it's always better when the DEQ is doing the regulation in the state of Wyoming than having the EPA directly do that regulation, Mr. Chairman. So one of the things that we're being very careful with here and working with the DEQ on is to ensure that they're coordinating with the EPA and that nothing we're doing through this legislation is going to threaten our primacy over these Class 6 injector wells, where those Class 6 injector wells, Mr. Chairman, are the types of well that we would be injecting CO2 into for underground storage and sequestration. So moving on to page 3 is the key concept here, which is a certificate of project completion, release, and a transfer of title and custody. So this liability transfer is a long-term concept whereby the state of Wyoming assumes liability for the long-term management, ownership, and all other associated aspects of the stored and sequestered CO2. But it's only after a pretty rigorous series of challenges are met by the injector that the state of Wyoming would assume that liability. And this is really the key to getting any adoption of this type of technology, where if a company or corporation has to assume infinite timeline liability, they will not participate in these types of projects. So we needed the ability for the state of Wyoming to set standards and criteria after which the state of Wyoming would assume that liability. And you see the beginning of that discussion on page 3, where after all carbon dioxide injections underground or into pore space are completed as provided by a permit issued, we may issue a certificate of project completion that requires providing public notice on line 12 and 13, an opportunity for public comment, a public hearing. You see on page 3, line 16, that a certificate of project completion shall not be issued until at least 10 years after carbon dioxide injections end. This is where the standing committee amendment will come in, and I will have that read in and move in a little bit. After we go through the bill, we'll come back to it. Paragraph C indicates that the certificate of project completion shall not be issued until the injector with the title meets the following standards. You can see full compliance with all laws. They've addressed any pending claims regarding the injection. And this is an essential on Romanet 3. The underground place or pore space where the carbon dioxide was injected or stored is expected to no longer expand vertically or horizontally and poses no threat to human health, human safety, the environment, or underground sources of drinking water. This takes a long time to prove out, probably more than a decade before the monitoring wells and the modeling working together will indicate that that CO2 is parked and is not subject to any pressure deviations that would allow it to infiltrate other zones or infiltrate drinking water.
Senator Rothfuss?
Yes.
There is a standing committee amendment.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Romanet 4, that the stored or injected carbon dioxide is unlikely to cross any underground barriers or pore spaces into other pore space. Everything is in good condition pursuant to Romanet 5. Everything is plugged appropriately through proper reclamation on Romanet 6. And then assuming all of those are in place upon the issuance, that's the moment when the liability will be exchanged with the state. And with that exchange, you see in Romanet 1, the state will gain title to the stored or injected carbon dioxide, any of the facilities used, and that there will be no payment or compensation for that transference. So it's a one-to-one swap. The title will be acquired pursuant to 2, it shall be transferred pursuant to 3. And that another key provision here is Romanet 4 on page 6. This is essential. The injector and all persons who generated any injected or stored carbon dioxide shall be forever released from all regulatory requirements associated with the continued storage and maintenance of the injected carbon dioxide. That's what this bill does. That's the key point. And that's where, if you have any concern, it's probably going to be based on that language, but that is the essential language that we need to move this program forward. Any bond shall be released. And another key provision here on Romanet 6 that I want to point out, page 6, is that the state, through the department, that's DEQ, shall assume responsibility to manage and monitor the stored carbon dioxide. And then it says, until such time when the federal government assumes responsibility for the long-term monitoring and management of stored carbon dioxide. There's two things this says. The first is that the state's taking over all the management and monitoring. That's essential. The second part of that sentence seems to imply that there are plans for the federal government to take this over. There are no such plans. It's written that way so that if the federal government ever offers to take over, we will hand it to them happily so that we don't have to continue doing the monitoring. But there's no such plan at this point in time, so it's kind of important to realize that. All right, so that was the hard part of the bill going on, Mr. Chairman. We have conforming amendments, which are always nice to go through. So beginning on page 6 and 7, you see conforming amendments in existing carbon sequestration statutes. Same thing on page 8 and 9, referring back, and on page 10. Page 11, the new paragraphs N and O just talk about filing the permit with the county clerk and ensuring that that is on record. On page 12, conforming amendments. Page 13 is the creation of a geologic sequestration special revenue account, which is then fed by funds that are provided in B, associated with all monies collected by the department to measure, monitor, and verify Wyoming geologic sequestration and project completion. So in other words, any funds generated are saved, the revenue off of the savings stays in that fund, and then those funds are utilized both to monitor and maintain and protect, as well as remediation on the legislation. Page 14 indicates what the funds can be used for, and then finally on page 15 is effectively the promulgation of the rules and the effectiveness of it. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 and ask that that be read in.
Senate File 47, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 17, delete.
I move Standing
Thank
Committee
you.
Amendment number 1 to Senate File 47 and ask the body's favorable consideration. Mr. Chairman, in our discussions, this goes into page 3, line 17, which said a minimum of 10 years following the injection. We changed that to a minimum of 20 years. Under no circumstance do we expect it to take less than 20 years, and we wanted to provide some confidence that nothing would be hurried in this process. So if there are no questions on the Standing Committee Amendment, I would call for the question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 47, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 47 has passed Committee of the Whole. We
Mr.
are
Chairman,
back on the bill. Senator Rothfuss.
that is the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Discussion. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, the committee was right. This is an important bill, and I do have several questions on it. We are seeing more opportunity for carbon sequestration. We are getting at least one technique that is getting to the point where we say, okay, this one has been proved and will work. And it's a solvent recovery process type thing. Using I think an amine type solvent, but I'm sure the good senator from the Ivory Tower knows more about that than I do. Mr. Chairman, I have several questions. First, in my district, there is a big CO2 injection project, Salt Creek Oil Field. Been very profitable for the state of Wyoming. I think it's profitable for the operators. They're continuing to do it. Pipes CO2 from the Jonah Field clear to northern Natrona County to operate it. There are some amendments here to the statutes governing that kind of thing. Mr. Chairman, my first question is there any chance that those amendments are going to adversely affect ongoing CO2 operations, tertiary recovery operations, or new prospective ones? There's some statutory references in there, and frankly, I don't fully understand them. So that's my first question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just a question on page 5 under Romanet I, just an explanation of why the state would want to acquire. If you go down to line 12, it says any facilities used to inject or store carbon dioxide. And then the second part of that is without payment or any compensation. So there's really two questions I have on that section. Why would we want to assume the equipment and the facilities? And then why without any payment or compensation to do so?
Further discussion, questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the good tall senator from Natrona County's question about whether this would adversely affect any of the existing enhanced oil recovery endeavors, my answer would be no. We have not heard any objection from anyone that was a stakeholder. Certainly the associations that represent those stakeholders had nothing negative to say and were supportive of this legislation. And then the second thing I would say is that there is a possibility that it would be valuable to them. I can't predict what they would do with their business model, but it is possible to transition a Category 2, Type 2 injection well into a 6 and then have permanent sequestration, and you might be able to get a tax credit for that. At the same time, that particular operation, depending on what the geology looks like, might not be appropriate or suitable for permanent sequestration. So it might not be a viable project, but it might. And again, that depends on the geology. Going to the question from the good senator from Carbon County, why would we assume the equipment? The assumption is if we're taking over all of the responsibility, there are going to be monitoring wells there. There's going to be equipment and apparatus that are supporting their operation to that point in time. The assumption here would be that all of those facilities would be turned over to the state so that we wouldn't have to build new ones effectively. We don't have to do it over again. If we're taking the liability, we're not going to pay to take over the operation. That is a win for the injector. The injector wants to sever that liability as part of their business plan. That's a good thing for them, but the state's not going to pay for those assets or the assumption of liability. The idea of this statute is it's going to be an even swap. We're not giving them anything, they're not giving us anything. When they meet certain standards, if they hand the keys over to the operation, we will take over the monitoring, and we'll take over the equipment, we'll take over the apparatus, and you'll see in a previous statement that it all had to be in good working order. So we're not going to receive it if it's all broken down. It needs to be operating, monitoring wells and equipment that are appropriate for the circumstance before we would be willing to sever and accept the liability.
Further questions, Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, and I would agree on the monitoring component of that, and maybe even the actual injection equipment, but it says any facilities. So my concern is, are we now adopting that it could be miles of pipelines in certain cases to do this, to actually get the CO2 to the injection site? Is that part of the facilities? And I know this will be a work in progress. I'm just trying to see if that language is overly broad at this point. It could be 100 miles of pipeline as part of that facilities to get it from, potential coal-fired power plant to an injection site. And the way I read that, that would include that entire pipeline from that facility to the injection site. And so it's just something that maybe the facilities is a little too broad, but just to bring it to the attention of the Minerals Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Further questions, Senator Perkins, and then
Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on some of those issues, and then I'm brushing off some cobwebs because I was on the Judiciary Committee that worked when we did these things originally, and we wrestled with this liability assumption issue, and we didn't quite know enough back then to do that. And since then, I think we've had significant modeling and a lot of other research has been done to help us understand that. A couple things. One is did you change the jurisdiction? So when we were doing deep and the underground storage was supposed to be permanent, that was then under the DEQ. So it's primacy. But if it was for enhanced oil recovery and was not necessarily at least at that point in time, being considered to be permanent storage, but was going to be more industrial use, then that was left under the jurisdiction of the Oil and Gas Commission. And so if there's a transition, going back to my good friend from Toronto County's question, if there's a transition from a use for enhanced oil recovery or other purpose that now is being abandoned, and ultimately that does qualify for permanent storage, is there a mechanism to transfer the jurisdiction from one to the other? And so one question there. Another question I would have is with respect to absorbing those facilities, we think that this is permanent storage. And so, those it would be very possible those pipelines and transmission lines could be could be abandoned, because you're not anticipating, if you keep pressure in the formation, you'll never turn it over to the state because you're continuing to add to it. So it doesn't have 20 years to stabilize. So if we do that, but at some point, has there been any, was there any discussion, and I don't know where this is at, about any potential or future opportunity to, if somehow that became, you wanted to get it back, is there been any session about that, or is that just so far out there that we don't want to know about that? And then the third one was with respect to the liability. I was just wondering about, so they do this, they've done it for 20 years. They've had to plug all the existing wells. Is there any liability, or do we need to do something with respect to statute of limitations on that if there's a latent defect in casing or other type of issue that the representation was, hey, we've got this for 10 years, it's there, and then later they find out there's a leak and there was an error, a latent defect in all the effort they made to stabilize and monitor that, there's latent defect. Do we need to do something with the statute of limitations so that they're not responsible for the liability related to the storage of it, but they may be responsibility to come back and fix something that they didn't do right the first time? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good senator from Carbon County, following up on the facilities used to inject or store the carbon dioxide. The broadness of that, it is a good question. It's not something we discussed specifically as to whether or not that's narrow enough. The intent was consistent with what I said, but the language might not be. One thing I would say is that there certainly is a lot that would be followed up with rule and regulation, and obviously that's provided for. So it might be taken care of, but it is certainly something that's worth flagging. And as I said, we've got about 20 plus years to work on this. I should have noted there's at least one project which there's interest of, and then there's a couple more that are down the road a little bit. So as the tall senator mentioned, there is already some interest in this, but there's some time yet. So it would be good to potentially further take a look at that Romanet 1 and see if we need to narrow the language there. Going to the good senator from Natrona County's 3 questions. The first is the jurisdictional transition, and there was no change to how that's done. So while it's a Class 2 injector well for enhanced oil recovery, that is with the OGCC and will remain entirely with the OGCC while it's utilized for oil and gas and enhanced oil recovery. But there is already a mechanism in place in statute, and I feel like we passed this 8 years ago or something, which would allow a transition from Class 2 to Class 6. So that process is in place, and with that transition is a transition of jurisdiction and a series of requirements that it meet Class 6 standards before the Department of Environmental Quality on behalf of the EPA will take over authority and jurisdiction of it. So you can definitely do that transition, but not every Class 2 well can become a Class 6 well. It wouldn't necessarily make certification on that. Again, goes back to a lot about geology and what you can and can't do. The second question was the idea of what if we want to get the CO2 back? It's just a little bit anticipated by this bill because it does say that title to the CO2 goes to the state of Wyoming with the anticipation that if there is a property question because somehow we want that CO2, we know that the state of Wyoming has ownership of the CO2. In the pore space, that's about the end of what we've really thought through when it comes to, all right, well, what if somebody really does want to use it later? How would that work? It is down the road a ways, but it's something that we've started discussion of, but we haven't gone too deeply into. With regard to the statute of limitations and the liability, if you have something along the lines of a failure or negligence, as this is drafted, it really is a complete cessation of liability. Now, I think there probably is some question if there were true negligence, whether you could potentially go back and seek a remedy, or whether the language that explicitly, what you see on page 6, Romanet 4, the injector and all persons who generated any injected or stored carbon dioxide shall be forever released from all regulatory requirements associated with the continued storage and maintenance of the injected carbon dioxide. You know, it doesn't necessarily extend to negligence of quality of materials or anything along those lines. So there might be availability of a remedy, but again, while we raised that question, we didn't dig too deeply into that question. So I think it's whether we do it at this point in time and try and find a way to insert some language, or whether we flag that for follow-up, I think it needs to be addressed and clarified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott, and then Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, some of my questions have been asked and answered already, but I do have one further one. Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of at least one plan out there which involves using CO2 that's captured for enhanced oil recovery when the price of oil is high enough, and then would contemplate going to a deep sequestration and collecting a federal subsidy when the price of oil is not high enough, sort of as a financial backstop for the promoters, that they have a decent chance of at least recovering their investment through that. Is there anything in here that would prevent you from going back and forth between those two modes, with really oil prices being the trigger?
Senator Rothfuss.
Just briefly on that last question, no, you would not close the geological formation until you had concluded all of that business. So I could imagine doing a project like that over the span of perhaps 10, 20 years. And then once you have reached a point where you've done all of the EOR that you think is rational, you'd shut down that project. You might still have time on the geological formation, but you certainly wouldn't close that down and begin the certification process until you'd filled it up effectively. And only after that would you, but no problem in terms of that business model.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address a couple of those questions from the senator from Bates Creek, the amendment would not affect the ongoing operations at Salt Creek. The operations at Salt Creek are enhanced oil recovery. They're not carbon sequestration. So those kind of projects would go right on. And I agree with the senator from Laramie that you could have one of these going simultaneously, but they're both licensed differently. You'd have to go through a lot of rigmarole to license both, and you'd license them in different stratas in the earth also. So there's quite a bit of difference in the two, EORI and CCS. So, but you could do it. You can do anything you want, I guess, if you can get the license to do it. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator, well, we're back to the bighorns. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak just real briefly to the logistics and the facilities that was discussed. We got to remember that we're talking about acquiring these facilities 20 years after injection has ceased, a minimum of 20 years. We did talk a little bit to the DEQ about that and what it would require for them to release the property. The injection facilities would be long gone. The site would be cleaned and restoration work would be done. The pipeline would either be abandoned and sealed or repurposed to another area. Those are not facilities that would go with the injector when the state does acquire liability. The DEQ and this is one of the really great things about this bill. This is not just about liability. This is a path forward for the state of Wyoming. We've been talking about CO2 for 14 years, and this is a tool that actually allows this to start happening. We've got operators out there right now that are waiting on the state of Wyoming to give them the rules so they can move forward with their plans. This is the step to do that. As the senator from the wonderful Ivory Tower said, this is going to be a working project. We're going to continue to amend it as we go, as we learn. But this is not just a this is not just a liability bill. This is a business development bill. This is a path to the future for Wyoming. It brings the DEQ and the business development and the oil and gas all together and put them all on the same path. It's where the state of Wyoming needs to go. It really is. This is our future.
Further discussion? We are on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation that Senate File 47 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 47 has passed the committee of the whole. Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I move committee of whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion of the majority floor leader. Do I call for a vote on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Committee of the whole.
If we get done, we go back in a little bit.
We're going, no, we're gonna take a look.
We're done for the day, and then we'll do
The
the budget, right? Senator Dockstader.
For an hour.
We're gonna. Reading clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 12, do pass amended. Senate File 48, do pass. Senate File 26, do pass. Senate File 47, do pass amended. Senator Wasserberger, Chairman.
For the motion, all those in favor say aye. Oh, whoops, we need a motion. Sorry, I was headed down the revenue already, so go ahead. Thought we had you. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Mr. Floor Leader.
Mr. President, thank you for the floor. Everybody, we're going to go ahead and go out for lunch. We're going to come back after lunch, go back into the budget. And as we get through it, if we got time left, we'll go back into the committee of the whole this afternoon. We're going to do a 1-hour lunch break. Mr. President, I move we stand recessed until 1 p.m.
Announcements? Senator Case?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Revenue Committee will be on an expedited schedule in the noon recess. We'll be meeting in the Connector West number 6. We'll take up Senate Joint Resolution 2, Senior Citizens Property Tax Relief, Constitutional Amendment. I know the sponsor of that bill, Mr. President. It's a good bill. Senate File 76, Financial Exploitation of Vulnerable Adults. I know that sponsor too. Watch him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. President. Announcement for early tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. in Connector Room 6. Your Perfect Committee, Committee 10, will hear Senate File 83, or excuse me, Senate File 54, Licensed Professional Counselor Compact, Senate File 83, Prohibiting Chemical Abortions, and Senate File 114, Employer COVID-19 Vaccine Mandate and Exemptions.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee number 5, Agricultural, meets today upon adjournment in Capitol Extension Room W2N online to consider Senate File 86, Wildfires One Call Exemption, Senate File 81, Clarification of Existing State Ownership of Groundwater, and Senate File 97, Change in Party Affiliation.
Thank you, Senator Boner. Any other announcements? All right, you heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. 1-hour lunch break. We'll be back at 1.